Hi, I'm Michael Peter Olson, and welcome to ECello Moments. Today I'm going to talk about EQ, how you can use it to make electric cello and amplified acoustic cello sound better. Also, we're going to take a close look at the new mkII Para EQ bass edition from Empress Effects. So because this series is designed for musicians that may or may not have much pro audio experience, I will explain any tech stuff in plain language. So, first, a quick rundown of the basics. EQ is short for equalizer, an electronic device that filters out or boosts selective parts of an audio signal. There is EQ of some kind in almost every device you use to listen to or record sound, especially things like phones, home audio systems, car stereos, and video games. And most people have a basic idea of what it is. Anytime you've ever had a knob or control on something labeled bass or treble, that's an EQ. As the full name implies, EQ was originally intended in the early days of electronic recording to even out parts of a sound that stuck out too much. But very soon after its invention, audio engineers began to use it creatively to make things they recorded sound different than the real-life version. And things got pretty crazy shortly after that. There is very little gear of any kind for cellists out there. There's definitely some instruments and pickups now, but there's basically no outboard processing built specifically for cello, and no cello-specific amplifiers either. Trust me, I've looked. Equipment that's made specifically to work with electric guitars and basses has been developed for almost 100 years now, but I still haven't seen even one specialized cello pedal. To be fair, as a group, we really aren't that big of a market share. Yet. But I think one of the biggest stumbling blocks is that there isn't a very clearly defined idea of what an electric cello should even sound like. We certainly don't think that electric guitar and acoustic guitar should sound the same anymore. We think of them as pretty much completely different sounding instruments. So I think it's a good idea to start with an open mind about what an electric cello can even sound like. Maybe not as much like an acoustic cello as you think. Because of this, I'm going a little extra hard on this video, as I think that EQ is the most important basic building block of any live or recording setup for amplified cello. It's sort of like your ground zero for what sound you want to create. So it really pays off getting to know it, and if you're going to buy one processor for your electric cello, it probably should be an EQ. I know a lot of serious cellists who labor over the subtle changes in their strings, French or Belgian style bridges, and sound post adjustments. All of that is basically like a kind of physical acoustic EQ. Essentially works the same way. So think of this as the electronic version of that. As mentioned, I'm going to be using the new Para EQ mkII bass pedal, made by Empress Effects in Ottawa, Ontario. I have bought and used several products from Empress, and they never disappoint. They were kind enough to send me this pedal after I suggested it would probably be really great for cellists, and you all should know about it. I haven't plugged it in yet, but I really like the paint job, and I think it looks delicious. To be clear though, nobody's paying me to say anything, so nobody has any direct influence on any opinions that I might have. I've actually been using the Empress mkI Para EQ for quite a few years. Mine is a little beat up looking now, but it still works great. This mkII new deluxe bass edition has some new features you won't find on that many EQ pedals out there, and they'll all be pretty useful to cellists, I think. This is an analog hardware EQ. This means there is nothing digital in the signal path. Modern recording software has all kinds of useful digital and virtual EQs built into it, and they're all very powerful, but when it comes to playing live, you're generally going to want to use something that's actually analog hardware like this. Number one, because it has no latency, which is a delay in the sounds you hear because the computer needs time to do its thing. Number two, a hardware EQ is never going to tell you that it decided not to do the thing you wanted to do on stage because it needs to update its operating system, or maybe just doesn't feel like it that day. This pedal has the same kind of controls you'll find on high-quality studio gear, used for working on any kind of sound. And though this does make it more complicated, this is the kind of equipment you're going to want to learn how to use. The more options a piece of gear like this has, the more you'll be able to use it in ways perhaps not even intended by the people who made it to make your perfect cello sound. The para in the name stands for parametric. This is different than a fixed band EQ, like for instance a bass or treble controller or a graphic EQ, both of which have knobs or sliders that are fixed at certain points in the frequency spectrum. The problem is, if those frequencies don't happen to correspond to the frequencies that you want to work with, well, you're out of luck. A parametric EQ allows you to pick out any particular frequency you want to use and make it quieter or louder. This is very good for your usage because it means that you can focus in very exactly and customize the sound to fit your particular instrument. The first thing an audio engineer is going to do with a new EQ is turn all the knobs all the way in all directions to hear what it does. It's kind of an ear training thing to learn a piece of gear, and it takes practice and listening just like learning an instrument. The more you use it, the better you'll get at it. With analog EQ, sometimes the magic happens when you push one control up against the other, basically boosting and cutting in almost the exact same place. The resulting overlap can create frequency curves that are subtle and hard to describe, except they're just right. It's part of this design in parametric EQs that they expect you to use it like that, and the classic EQ units are known for their ability to do this really well. A good analog EQ can change the sound of something quite dramatically, and yet it still somehow sounds natural, like you didn't do anything. This is also hard to describe. You just sort of have to experience it. It's all in the design and the way it treats something called phase in the different frequencies. Some people just call it mojo, though. What matters to you is a good quality EQ will somehow make it easy to dial in just the right tone, and a not so good one, be it digital or analog, with exactly the same controls, will somehow make it impossible to get a good sound. The more radical the change you want to make to a sound, the more the quality of the EQ matters. All this actually matters to cellists quite a bit, because cello pickups on electrics, and especially clip-on acoustic pickups, generally need a lot of help to sound good. I think electric cellists worldwide are really searching for their sound, so we want something powerful. Across the top of the Para EQ, we have 3 separate bands labeled low, mid, and high. These are very general labels, as all 3 of these overlap on each other quite a bit. These go from subsonic rumble, well below any note the cello plays, up to the crispness and clarity in the high end of your sound. The 3 corresponding gain knobs, for our purposes you can think of gain as volume, will boost or cut the frequency you select by up to 15 decibels, or dB for short. If you don't want to use one of these sections, leave the gain knob in the middle, and then it won't boost or cut anything. On the top, you also get 3 controls for Q, which stands for quality of sound. It works in conjunction with the gain controls to make the boost or cut very narrow and only affect the exact frequency you choose, or a wider, more general boost and cut using your frequency choice as the center of it. In addition to all these controls, there is yet another set of knobs that give you even more boosts and cuts that you can use. There's a low frequency filter, which you can adjust here to cut out some of the undesirable very, very low sounds, and also a high frequency filter that allows you to cut some of the more undesirable very, very high sounds. There's also 2 fixed shelf EQs, which are basically like the bass and treble knobs on an old stereo system, except these sound a lot better. They gradually increase or decrease a big wide range at the bottom or top end. The Para Bass EQ also has 3 non-EQ features that are potentially very useful to you. Number 1, it has a switchable high Z input preamp. Actually, this pedal is made in Canada, so make that high Z. I'm going to show you why that can be extremely useful a little later in this video. Another nifty feature of this pedal is this switchable balanced out. What this means is with the right cable, you can get a balanced 1/4 inch out or even a 3-pin XLR. If you ever get stuck at a gig where you need a DI and you don't have one, this feature could come in very handy. And lastly, you get an adjustable boost with a foot switch you can use to make yourself instantly way louder to take that big solo over top of all the electric guitars, and likely annoy the sound person. So to start, I'm going to loop in some direct sound for one of my ECellos and twist all the knobs so you can hear what they sound like. Now, let's do a bit of tweaking and see if we can improve this direct sound. I'll start with the midband at around 200 Hz, a medium amount of Q, and cut around 5 dB to reduce the general muddiness that's happening down there. Next, I'll sweep the low cut up to take out some of the rumble in the sound from the bow scraping and the thumps when the bow changes. I'm aiming for right under where the open C string lives, and that's about at 70 Hz. This control is not like a wall though. The cut is quite gentle and gradual, so you might find that you can turn it up a bit higher than you might think before you really hear it. I'm going to set my low cut a bit higher than I usually would, and then find the C string at around 70 Hz-ish with the low parametric and boost it a little bit. This is just my personal taste, but it gives a fun bit of extra power when you hit the C string and makes the low end chunky but still under control. Next, I'll use the high filter to take out some of the top end that I know on this instrument is mostly just bow scrapes and the slight hiss from the active preamp. The physical nature of an electric cello made out of solid maple means it really isn't making much fundamental sound over 5 kHz, and the pickup system on this thing tends to accentuate the mid-frequencies a bit more as well. But I would like to get as much crispness as I can without making the noise too loud. So what I will do is cut a certain amount to get rid of the really high stuff around 16 to 20 kHz that will be useless to me, and then I'll do a general top-end boost with the high shelf control, because I know it has a very gentle and natural sound to it. That should help those high frequencies that we still want to hear come out more. I can sort of balance the high cut and the high shelf control back and forth against each other until they sound right. I know this instrument has a thing where frequencies around 800 Hz stick out a little farther than I'd like. I'm going to sweep in with a narrow Q and the high parametric and take a little notch out there. So there's my first pass. It's fairly subtle, but I think this will be easier to get a nice balanced even sound running into my various effects. I will reset this to 0 and do the whole process again about 4 or 5 times on several different days with fresh ears, as I'm getting to know the pedal. Every cello being made of wood will more or less be a different kind of beast EQ, and different pickup styles will also create a lot of variation. If you blend a little signal from a miniature mic with your pickup, use a body contact mic like the Headway Band or the Schertler Dynamic, or a K&K or Barkus Berry clip-on piezo, they will all sound completely different. So as a contrasting example, let's clip a typical piezo pickup onto my acoustic cello and hear that. This is also a great opportunity to demonstrate the built-in preamp on the Para EQ. Here is the signal direct from the pickup into a normal input high-quality passive DI box. Okay, now let's try the signal with the high Z preamp engaged, keeping in mind that we're not even using the EQ part of the pedal right now. It's louder because it's strengthening the signal, but you'll also notice it picks up a lot more fullness and low end in the sound that the impedance mismatching was cutting out. You can't really EQ that sound back in because it's actually missing before the EQ gets to it. So using a preamp like this with a passive piezo pickup before anything else is kind of a no-brainer. I'll quickly tweak this sound and show you what I did. This sound had sort of the opposite problem to my ECello body electric, as it has a lot of top end, not all of it desirable. I did bring the low cut up to around 70 Hz again, but this time I also increased the low shelf by 5 dB to give it a nice lift in the bottom and cut it back just a tiny bit, centered around 100 Hz with a wide Q. I brought the high filter down to probably about 5 kHz and took a tiny bit more off with the high shelf as well. Then I went in at the very top of the range of the high parametric at 9.7 kilohertz and cut a bit more with the most narrow Q setting. When I got it under control though, I was finding that it made the mid-range seem a little bit more muddy, so I ended up cutting a little bit of 300 to 400 hertz with a medium Q. In the end, it is better to have a bit too much of a sound than you have to cut than not enough, because as I mentioned earlier, you can't boost what isn't there in the first place. As you can see, I'm using everything this box does, and I have the settings pushing up against each other quite a bit. But because this EQ has high quality components and is designed really well, the end result is really natural sounding and will probably sound really great with a little reverb on it. So to sum up my thoughts about this pedal, it's not cheap, but quality costs. And if you're buying in Canada, it's local and you're supporting an independent company that makes good stuff. And this really is a top quality EQ that's comparable to a boutique studio unit. I was thinking that 15 dB might be a little on the light side for boost and cut, but it was actually just enough to get everything done. And changing that would probably adversely affect how transparent this EQ can be. Also, having a fully variable Q control as opposed to a few set positions is really useful and powerful. At first, I was a little bit worried that the high frequency band didn't go as high as I might like, and I do think it would have been nice to see it go up to maybe 12 kilohertz. But the pedal, of course, was designed with bass in mind, and in return for a little less high range on the parametric, you get a very useful amount of extra mid-control, all the way down to 375 Hz. And that actually could be more useful, especially with the solid body electric cello. Also, I have to say that as soon as I started using that really natural sounding high shelf to boost the top, I didn't miss it that much. By the same token, the low parametric section probably goes a little lower than you're likely going to need. But if you happen to play a 5 or 6 string electric cello with a low F, then it's a no-brainer. You can definitely make a lot of use of that control. I'm quite sure you could use the Empress Para EQ Mark II Deluxe non-bass version of the pedal with cello, and it would be great. But then you're missing out on this really great sounding high impedance preamp, which I thought was particularly good, and also the balanced built-in DI feature, which definitely could be useful on stage. So taking that all into account, I'd say that the Empress Para EQ Mark II bass pedal is probably one of the very best EQs you could buy for any kind of cello rig. The build quality is excellent, it looks great, it's pretty much as powerful and useful as a studio EQ, and that's what you want when you're crafting a customized cello sound. I'm actually going to start using it in my rig, so I really can't give a better review than that. So that's it for today. Feel free to comment and follow, hit the like button, and tell all your cello friends. See you next video.